Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Books Beside My Bed video. This is my reading week from the 30th of June until the 6th of July and it's been a big week. I have been on school holidays, so I've read a ridiculous number of books and I'll talk about that in a minute. For those of you who like an update on my general media habits, I did finish watching Veronica Mars, so I went all the way through seasons 1, 2 and 3 in basically a week and a bit, and I watched the movie twice. And I also started rewatching season 1 because my mum hadn't seen it, so I started rewatching the first couple of episodes with her because that's what you do. I also started catching up on the originals, starting about halfway through season 2 to about a third of the way through season 3. I'm pretty sure I've actually seen that, but I actually can't remember it and I don't really know what's going on, so I am trying to catch up on that. And I also rewatched one of my favourite movies of all time, Speed, because it is a great film and that was a wonderful, wonderful decision that made my life so much happier on the weekend. I also want to talk a little bit about what's going to happen in next week's reading wrap up. So I decided to change things up with my reading for next week. I do have one more week of school holidays, so I've got a bit of time to read. On Twitter, I put out a post asking people to pick a number between I think 1 and 39-ish. Maybe, I forget what the actual number was, then a second number between 1 and 6, which is essentially my Kindle, because my Kindle has 300 and something books on it. That doesn't stress me out because they all conveniently fit on this thing, which does not take up space in my apartment. So I'm not worried about reading them, but I just thought that for a week I'm going to read nothing but what's on my Kindle, and so a whole bunch of lovely people picked some numbers and have basically decided my TBR for next week. I'm not going to talk about their numbers and the people and which books I'm going to be reading. I'll do that in next week's video, but I do have 7 books that I'm going to read off my Kindle. Hopefully a few more if I get a chance to do that, because I do find reading on my Kindle is a little bit quicker. Yes, that's going to be exciting and just a different way to read just for a week, just to do something different. Now into this week's reading stats. So I read 12 books in the last 7 days. 2 of them were adult books, 5 were young adult books, and 5 were either children's or middle grade books. I read a total of 2,135 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 178 books, and I am currently ahead of what I was reading this time last year by about 25 books, which is kind of insane, but at the same time, I'm very impressed with myself. Also, because there's so many books, I'm just sort of going to go through them quite quickly and leave links to all of them down below so that you can check them out if you want more information. The first book that I read this week was Lips Touch by Laini Taylor, which is actually a collection of 3 short stories by Laini Taylor. This is a 2013 release from Hodder and Stoughton and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The 3 short stories all document sort of first kiss stories. They were good, they were fine, there was nothing wrong with them. It's Laini Taylor, her writing's beautiful and I enjoy reading it. I didn't really connect with all of them and I don't know whether it's because they're short stories or just because I struggled a little bit with some of the fantasy elements in them, because they do have those fantasy paranormal elements. The first one I really, really loved. It is called Goblin Fruit and it is essentially the story of how goblins try and steal the souls of humans, and I love that sort of stuff. I just find that really interesting and intriguing. So that one was my absolute favourite. The others were perfectly fine. There was a shape-shifting magic-y type one, and there was another one about a girl who was cursed as a child never to speak, and it's all about deals with the devil and all sorts of things, which was great. I enjoyed them. They were good fun. I am glad that I finally read this collection and it's nice to read something different from Laini Taylor. I also read The Right Genre by Laurie Jameson Rogge and Paul Kropp. This is a teaching reference book. It is all about writing. It is about ways of approaching writing so that it makes it accessible for kids. It is packed full of really fantastic, great ideas. I have got a whole lot of things that I'm going to be taking back into my classroom and doing as mini lessons and writer's notebook lessons with them. So I'm very glad that I finally got a chance to actually read through the whole book, not just the poetry section, which I've read a few times now because we're teaching poetry next term. So this one, great, goes through a whole lot of different genres, different ways of approaching it, different mini lessons, very much appreciate it. This is a 2018 release from Hawker Brownlow, and if you want a rating, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Call It What You Want by Bridget Kemmerer. This was sent to me from Bloomsbury unsolicited. It is a 2019 release from Bloomsbury and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I've already done a review for this on my blog, so I'll leave a link to that down below, but essentially it follows 2 students in a high school, and I have to say that I read this after I finished binge watching Veronica Mars, and this gave me Neptune high feels because the 2 main characters, Rob and Megan, are students who are on the outer of the popular group in school. So Rob was one of the popular kids until his father was found guilty of embezzling money and basically left half the town broke and in debt. Megan lives in the shadow of her sister, and in the previous year she got caught doing something at school that she shouldn't have been doing, and it's basically left her a social pariah. And the two of them end up stuck together working on an assignment. Neither of them are particularly happy about that because they're quite happy. Well, happy is not the right word. They would rather not be involved with other people at the moment because everyone else is basically treating them like they don't belong. Eventually, they begin to open up to one another and find that even though their stories are not the same, that they do have common ground, and they find empathy and sympathy for one another, and it sort of goes from there. There's a whole lot of stuff in there. There's a little bit of a Robin Hood theme going on as well. Honestly, it was just delightful, easy to read, read it in one sitting, enjoyed it. Glad to know that I also enjoy Bridget Camera's contemporary work. The next 3 books I read were e-arcs from NetGalley. They're all children's picture books, so they won't take very long to talk about. The first one is Join the No Plastic Challenge by Scott Ritchie. This is a 2019 release from Kids Can Press. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It is the story of a young boy who is having his birthday, and he decides that instead of having a big, massive birthday party, he and his friends are going to have a no plastic day challenge. As the day continues, the kids discover all the different ways to continue to experience the things that they like to experience during parties, but without the single-use plastic aspect. And so this story has a dual narrative and also informative twist on it. So on each page, you also get a little bit of information about alternatives that you can make to using single-use plastic. I will be reading this one with my class because we just finished a whole unit on sustainability, and the kids were quite big on sort of limiting their single-use plastic. I just thought it was appropriate to read it. So it was quite a good one, and it's very easy for kids to unpack and understand. Then I read Josephine Baker and Lucy Maud Montgomery, which are 2 picture books in the Little People Big Dreams series, I think. You've probably seen them in bookstores. They're the hardcover books with the really gorgeous cartoony illustrations. They're biographies of famous people. And these are both 2019 releases from Francis Lincoln Children's Books, and I gave them both 4 out of 5 stars. One obviously follows the life of Josephine Baker and the other of Lucy Maud Montgomery, who is Helen Montgomery. And I did not know much about their stories before it. I still don't know a huge amount because these are picture books and they don't go into a lot of depth about the actual people's biographies, but they are very whimsical, beautiful. They are very easily accessible for kids, and they're a great way to introduce them to famous figures in history and highlight how people have persevered with their dreams and been able to find success in that as well. So they're great little picture books. I look forward to reading more in the future. Continuing my Veronica Mars binge fest, I read the $1,000 Tan Line and Mr. Kiss and Tell, which are 2 books written by Rob Thomas and Jennifer Graham that were published in 2014 and 2015 respectively by Alan Unwin here in Australia. I gave them both 4 out of 5 stars. They are sort of filler books or set after the Veronica Mars movie, and I think part of them are considered canon for the season 4 episodes that are coming up, particularly in relation to the sheriff, because there's been a change that's happened. So I'm glad I read them. They're not the greatest things in the world, but it's just nice being back in the world and seeing the characters and seeing sort of different stories, and it played out in a different format. In the $1,000 Tan Line, Veronica begins to investigate a case of 2 missing college girls who disappear during spring break in Neptune, and what she discovers is quite different from what everyone first believes has happened to these kids. It also ties up some of the storylines involving Veronica's own family, her father and her mother, and sort of what's happening there. The downside to this book is that basically Logan is back on active duty, so you only get him through very brief Skype phone calls with Veronica, which was just frankly not enough. But that said, everyone else was back in play, and it was just really nice to see all those characters back. In Mr. Kiss and Tell, Veronica is investigating the assault and rape of high-end escorts by a man known only as Mr. Kiss and Tell, while at the same time also helping her father and Cliff to discredit the sheriff and try and run the sheriff out of office, basically. The whole thing has its bit of the political spin on it, and Logan's back in this one. I still can't believe that he's a Navy pilot. I don't know why when I saw in the movie that he was in the Navy, it didn't bother me so much, but I don't know. I didn't actually picture him as a pilot, but okay, whatever. I'll take that. My favorite part was when Veronica and Logan get a puppy, because we need more dogs in books. That's all I'm going to say. Then I read Black Cockatoo by Carl Marison and Hakia Hustler. This is a 2018 release from Manga Books, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It is a very tiny little middle grade book, and it is own voices, and it is about Mia, who lives with her family, and she rescues a black cockatoo who is her totem animal. And she rescues the black cockatoo from her older brother, who is quite disrespectful towards things in nature and is really moved away from his family's teachings about their indigenous culture, which makes everyone in the family quite sad. And he shoots the black cockatoo out of a tree, and she decides to rescue it and try and keep it safe. And the story sort of goes from there, and it's really about finding acceptance and finding your place and understanding your culture and your history, and it was just a lovely, lovely story, and I'm looking forward to taking this into my classroom. And then I read Graveyard Shift in Ghost Town by Michael Pryor, which is a Love Osway book. This is a 2019 release from Allen and Unwin, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is the follow-up to Gap Year in Ghost Town, which I read last year and absolutely adored. It is about ghost hunting in Melbourne. We follow Anton, who at the start of this book turns 19, and he is part of his family's ghost hunting business alongside Rani, who is from the UK, and they basically recruited his father, Leon, and his best friend, Beck. Together, they all uncover some very insidious ghost hauntings in Melbourne, where there are more and more ghosts on the street causing havoc, as well as a group of people who are apparently up to no good. The one thing I love about these books is, one, it is Melbourne down to a T. It is so fun and funny, and Michael does a really great job of throwing in pop culture references all the way through it. I'm pretty sure I picked up house references, supernatural references, and it's a whole other stack of stuff going on in here. All I can say about this book is, one, I laughed a lot. There's a lot of blue tabs, and most of those are because that's where I was laughing out loud. I also discovered a lot more about Melbourne that I didn't know, like the fact that we used to have the world's largest steerable telescope, and that there's an observatory in Melbourne in the Botanical Gardens. I mean, I didn't know that. I don't know why I didn't know that, but I didn't. And I think that next week, in my last week of the school holidays, I will be traipsing around Melbourne going to look at things I didn't know existed. If you are at all a fan of young adult paranormal ghost hunting books, I highly recommend you check out this series. It is really good fun. I also read Writing the Future by Kay Lowe, which is a 2019 release from Peter Publishing. Peter is the Primary English Teaching Association of Australia, and my school subscribes to them, which is why I have a copy of the book. I got lots of really great ideas. This is all looking at how writing and writers have changed over the years, and the skills that students these days need in order to be writers. It was very, very interesting, and there's a lot of really good tips that I took away from it, so I'm going to have to go through these notes and find a way to put them in some coherent note-taking form so that I can take this book back to work. And finally, I read 300 Minutes of Danger by Jack Heath. This is the first book in his however many minutes of danger series. I read 400 and 500 Minutes of Danger earlier in the year because I found them in the school library. Didn't have this one. Found it a couple of months ago, and I finally read it, and I need to take it into school because the kids have been asking me to do it because they've started reading the other books, and they're very mad at me for not reading this and taking it in. This was first published in 2015 by Scholastic, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It is a collection of 10 short stories that take place over 30 minutes each, hence the 300 Minutes of Danger, and basically they're designed for kids to be able to read them in about 30 minutes. Adults will speed through them. I think I read the whole thing in about 80 minutes, maybe. The stories are connected, but essentially they follow a whole series of different characters who are sort of middle grade to young adult age, and they find themselves in all sorts of weird, dangerous situations that they need to escape out of. You've got someone who is in an aeroplane falling out of the sky and they don't really have a proper working parachute. You've got someone who ends up covered in radioactive waste, someone exploring the depths of the ocean, as well as there's a thread going through it that there is an outbreak of a virus that is quite deadly and dangerous the whole way through the stories. And I think it continues in 400 and 500 Minutes of Danger, but don't quote me on that one because it's been a while. They were fun, easy to read, and I made the connections between the stories easier in this one than I did in the others, so I was paying attention more. So those are all the books that I read in the last 7 days. Plus, where is it? Plus that, which is like this many more books. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books or if you're planning on reading any of them in the future. Otherwise, let me know what you have been reading over the last 7 days. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.